And joining us again tonight from Lviv, Ukraine, CBN News senior international correspondent George Thomas. George, what is Putin's calculation here? Is Russia just trying to create confusion, or is this an attempt designed to hide some sort of attack?
Well, this is part of the Kremlin playbook, right? We saw it in 2004 when they were amassing their troops along the Georgian border after outrage from Western countries, from NATO and from Georgian officials. They pulled back, and then about 8 days later, they went in and took South Ossetia and Abkhazia, in essence, taking a chunk of Georgia. They did that again in 2014 in the eastern part of Ukraine, when they supposedly sent in these little green men, as they were called, and they denied that they were part of the Russian army. Well, that's 8 years later. We all know that Russia has complete control of the eastern part of Ukraine. It's part of their playbook. But the reality is that we have, unlike the war 8 years ago, we have Twitter, we have TikTok, we have satellite imagery. We've got people with cell phones all over the place, including in like places like Belarus and in the eastern part of the country. So people are taking videos, and obviously the U.S. intelligence is relying on satellite imagery. They're taking constantly, flying their operations over the country and the region. And so they can see the evidence. And clearly from the Ukrainians, the UK, the US, the State Department, they're all saying that there is no evidence that Russia is in fact pulling back its troops. If it's pulling back, it's moving its forces to other areas of the country.
Yeah, today we learned that Russia's expelled the U.S.'s second highest diplomat from the U.S. Embassy in Moscow. George, how big of a deal is that?
Yeah. Well, interestingly, Mr. Gorman's expulsion came last week, and we're only finding it out today. According to the Russians, this is basically a tit-for-tat. The U.S. expelled the U.S. expelled a leading Russian diplomat a few months ago from Washington, D.C. And Russia today said, Moscow said today that this was in retaliation for that. So obviously it comes at a time with all of this going on, with 150,000 troops along Ukraine's borders. So it comes at a tense time. But again, this is the back and forth between our two countries at the moment.
George, are we already seeing attacks on either side of the border?
We are, in fact, I think for those in the public, in the American audience, this is a big deal today. The Ukrainians say that the Russian-backed separatists hit among a number of targets, including a kindergarten. The Russians say that in the last 24 hours, Ukrainian soldiers have been firing about 4 times into the Donbas region. The NATO and those who are monitoring that area say that is an outlandish accusation. But, keep in mind, Jenna, this has been going on for 8 years. 14,000 Ukrainians have died in the process of this, what I would call a frozen war. It's still going on. But it's something that has continued to take civilian casualties. Fortunately, there's no reporting as of today if anybody died in these attacks on both sides.
George, this week yesterday, we saw Ukrainians take to the streets to mark Unity Day. What is the feeling among Ukrainians this evening?
Well, I think across the country, there is this sense of, they don't know. They're not making preparations as if there's an invasion that's on the horizon. I was just in Kyiv the other day. I've been talking to sources in Kharkiv, which is on the northeastern part of Ukraine, very close to the border. I've got contacts who are right there, about 10 miles, less than 10 miles from the Russian border. I've got contacts in Mariupol, again, about 10 miles from the Russian front line. There's no sense of panic at all. Even in Kyiv, there's no sense of panic whatsoever. But the question people are constantly asking, they're saying, what is the pretext? What is the reason that Russian forces would even dare to come into Ukraine? What is the reason? And so far, there is no reason. And that's why today the president, from the State Department to the president of the United States, continuing to say that Russia is looking for a pretext, looking for a reason to come in. Perhaps the escalation in the east is one reason, but also what's interesting, I'm seeing a lot of traction on this whole idea that there is a quote-unquote genocide taking place in the East is something that is we're seeing more and more coming from Russian officials.
All right, George Thomas, tonight in Lviv, Ukraine. Thank you, George.